Hello, I'm Surreal. This project focuses on the systematic and institutional eradication of Black fathers. This is a social commentary on gender bias in the courtroom and how some mothers to children of Black men use establishments, institutions, and authorities to systematically marginalize and minimize Black men in the lives of their children. The question comes up, albeit barbershop talk or general conversation. Is it that people are unaware, or is it they simply don't care? How much can a mother get away with and maintain custody simply based off of her gender? Let's see. Well, let's go back to the beginning. My son's mother and I, we separated in August 2009. From 2009 to December 2009, we shared the same, living domicile. We never had any issues and anything like that. We're both adults. I definitely support marriage and respect it, but I don't believe in being married to anyone that doesn't want to be married to you. So there was never no conflict about that. Fast forward to October 2012, the situation has been unnecessarily difficult simply because that's just the way that she wanted it. She thrives off contact then and still does. I couldn't figure anything out. I was left in the dark, but it was very troublesome to me, everything that I did. Seeing my son once a month, speaking to him on the phone every day, and it always seemed to be some negativity or some conflict with his mom. And I just couldn't understand it. And I noticed that it was just getting more and more difficult. Everything that I did, trying to make positive steps, just became more and more difficult. So toward the end of October 23rd, 24th, 2012, I emailed or texted her, that I don't know what's going on, but we need to do better for our child's sake. It's just got to be better than what's going on. I'm not understanding the negativity. And, she replied, she wanted, things to be better, and she wanted to talk also. So she wasn't able to talk on that day. No problem. We can talk the following day, which we did. And it was pretty much a, come to Jesus meeting, what's really going on, because I'm not understanding our difficulty. She was evasive for a very long time, much of the conversation. And toward the latter part of the conversation, she informed me that as I knew her new best friend, since we had relocated to the Atlanta area, had moved in with her, as well as she had moved her kids in. And that was really something that took me aback, because we had many conversations at length, ad nauseum actually, about how we would co-parent together and how we would, respect one another. And even if the marriage ended and we weren't able to be the spouses that we wanted to be for each other, we would at least be the co-parents to one another for our child's sake. So that was everything to me. But she never had any intentions on that, because of course, she had already decided to move this person in. I didn't know at the time. I had my suspicions, but this was actually a love affair. It was not a platonic relationship at all. Matter of fact, both of these women engaged in affairs that ended both of their marriages. She was even called out by the husband of her partner. So this is definitely not what they claimed it to be. It was all manipulated from the beginning. Even still, everything that went down, it had already taken place. My focus was on my child, and I made that clear in every conversation throughout everything. And in the beginning, she freely admitted that this was her mistake, that she should have, been open and honest about everything. Because at this time, all I want to do is work so that we get to a good place for our son. That's it. You did what you did. It's what it was. Okay, let's be adults and let's sit down and talk about this. But that wasn't enough for her or her partner. She began to lash out at me and make me the fall guy, the bad guy for everything. Very much revisionist history. And, it just became to be a lot. So there were a lot of false statements made, even when I was open to just sitting down as adults. Let's sit down as kids involved. Let's sit down and talk about this. That only, for whatever reason, made them both more hostile, which it took me a lot to wrap my head around that. You've done all these things. You manipulated, you conspired, knowing how important this was to raise our child together and co-parent. You did these things that were counterproductive simply because you thought you could get away with it. And, the audacity of this person to be mad at me, or these people to be mad at me, simply because I wasn't going to stop being a father. Yeah, it's a lot to absorb. But I did. And there was just more dishonesty met with more dishonesty. And as open as I was to just co-parenting, that in and of itself was a problem. After my son's mother and I spoke about, the different changes in her living environment, her living arrangement, she freely admitted that, it was her fault. She should have, informed me. So the entire time, I'm open to knowing who's cohabitating in the same, domicile as my son. And I had always asked his mother about that anyway. I mean, it wasn't something new. I think any parent should know who's around their child. That's just fundamental. And but there was always an excuse as to why I never met this new best friend of hers, even though her new best friend, was a teacher at the private school that was ran out of a church that we all attended. And when I was in town, which was very regularly, I would take my son to school and pick him up from school, but I never ran into her, as I thought, her best friend, but her actual partner. And this was obviously intentional by her partner. Her partner is extremely controlling and manipulative. And it was always a thing about a cat and mouse game, a one-upsmanship. We can do whatever we want to, but you're going to do what we allow you to do. None of that ever mattered to me because, one, I was not even aware of the situation. Two, my only concern is my child. As I said, I respect the sanctity of marriage, but I don't believe in being with anybody that doesn't want to be with you. We're adults. All right, let's move on. But above everything else is supposed to be co-parenting with our child. And that was never the case because she only intended on co-parenting with her partner. Fast forward to my son's birthday party, which was about 4 or 5 weeks after we had this conversation and data exchange via email and text. It was clear to me with their interactions, their mannerism, even their dress. I had noticed a complete metamorphosis with my son's mom in her demeanor, her aggression, her dress, complete attitude. I mean, it was just a complete 180. And it was all masculine. And, of course I had my suspicions, but after meeting her partner and seeing the interaction of the two, there was nothing else to even debate about, But that night I was very proud because it was my son's birthday party. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about them, anything like that. But I'm hit with all this information at one time. I had nothing but pleasantries with her partner and everybody else that was there, as a matter of fact. Now, I did not speak to her, because I wasn't speaking to her before I saw her partner. I wasn't speaking to her just off the strength that, you've done nothing but lie to me for all these years. And why would I waste my time and energy in having a conversation with somebody that's lied to me? You wouldn't do that. So why are you gonna look sideways at me for doing the same thing? Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, looking for a different outcome. But miraculously, when I apply that by this genius, now when I apply it, I'm hostile, I'm aggressive. No, I don't have time to waste, and I don't like wasting my time. If all you've done is lie to me for a decade, then you know what? I think I'm cool with the fact that you're gonna lie to me for another decade. Why would I do that to myself? So, I didn't speak to her verbally, but I text. We still have to communicate. So you have a text, I have a text. We done. Communicate information and keep it moving for our child's sake. But there was no aggressiveness ever. Her partner, which was actually somewhat of a goal at the time, which I recognized that at the time, but I went along with it because it's all I had. She kind of flippantly and mockingly suggested that we all get together, because I'm sure her or my son's mom had indicated that that's something I had wanted from day one. Just even in her capacity as a would-be friend, I want to know who's around my child. I want to know who's babysitting my child. I think that's very basic. But she threw that out there, and it was no more than golden. She never intended on that. I mean, I could tell that in her face at the time, by the smirk on her face, the expression, the gloating that was clearly, in her face and in her eyes. I understood that. But still in all, I took that because it's more important to me to create a sound environment for my child. So if I had to take that, I took that. And, so be it. When I returned to Maryland from Atlanta, I asked my son's mom again repeatedly, I would like to, sit down, the four of us as adults. She has a husband. Clearly, this is what you guys want to do. Let's just sit down as adults and talk about how, we're raising these kids. And I'll never forget her response, because I didn't even realize it at the time until I was going back over this information. As I'm reading it, she said, not this trip, maybe next time. And even when she told me that verbally, it didn't register to me, but it did when I read it, because I'm realizing that this is the same excuse that I've heard every trip for a year now. This is a rubber stamp remark. This is something that's just automatic, pushback, playback. There was never any intention to sit down like adults. And when I realized that, I really didn't know how to feel about it. It took a lot out of me. Here I am. Clearly there was an affair going on during the marriage, during both of the marriages. And I'm man enough to sit here and say, do what you do. I even support you being happy. But my concern is my child. And that wasn't enough for these people. Now that was something altogether different to digest, because that goes into the intent. Their intent was to behave this way all along. Now, anybody can try to judge me. I honestly don't care. But what I do care about, I'm not going to let anybody lie on me. Now, unless you've been in that situation where this has been your life, really your comment is not authentic. It's not genuine, because you don't know what you would do in that situation. But we do know what I did in that situation, which I think is something only a real man would do. I put my feelings to a side. We got to make this work for our child's sake. They chose to behave the way that they did throughout and for years. And when it didn't go their way, what did they do? they resorted to, I'm afraid of the big black man thing. You know, how white are them? This was their avenue. This was their out. Everything became about alternate lifestyles or whatever, or if who didn't approve of this. I never said nothing about any of that. So this is only deflection and distractions from the facts and everybody's actions. I never said anything about that. As far as domestic violence, you know, these women chose something very serious that both men and women go through to exploit and basically make a mockery of, simply to hide their actions and their intentions. Now, I never made any disparaging remarks. Matter of fact, what you will see throughout this documentary, most of the things that happen between us are documented, either audio or video, some combination thereof, because when I realized just how dishonest my son's mother had been, either she was going to come clean immediately or she was going to dig in and start making these outlandish claims, which I knew she was, so I was prepared for that. Now, she went to court, perjured herself, all in the means to make me look like a monster. That's fine. I knew she was going to do that, so that's recorded. And that's a felony. Mandatory sentencing. This is how much this woman wanted to make me look like an animal, because she knew people would be so receptive to that. Again, it's on tape, which will be in this documentary. So we're gonna get to the answer. Is it that people are unaware that they don't care? How much you gonna let a person get away with because of their gender? February 18th, 2013 was the first time that I heard any claims of an altercation. And my son's mom, she specifically used the word altercation because an altercation elicits or conjures up thoughts of physicality. An altercation is definitely physical. She used that word on purpose. Not only was there no altercation, the complete story was fiction. I have the complete audio of our interactions. Again, I wasn't speaking to this woman. It's just who I am. I don't believe in arguing with anybody under any circumstances. If you don't agree with something, leave it alone. I'm a firm advocate, and if you ever argued with a fool, it was two fools arguing. Why? For what? Doesn't make sense. So I wasn't speaking to her, and I was not going to speak to her unless I knew I had everything recorded. So on that day, that Friday, a couple of days after going to court unnecessarily, I let my son sleep in. The morning after his birthday party in November. I packed the car with everything, made sure everything was good to go, because that was the only time I had to speak to his mom, because we did not speak over the telephone because it always devolved into an angry argument, and I couldn't understand that. All I do is give you over $1,000 a month, and I speak to my son to let him know that I love him. What's the problem? Why are we always arguing? I didn't realize that the argument was because I was doing these things and I was in my son's life. She and her partner resented. So fast forward to February 2013. She claims that we never met to have lunch, dinner, or break bread in these places. So she was adamant again about the surveillance when I had told the government Lighton, who is my child's attorney in this matter, you got to understand what she's doing here. She's trying to condition my son. She's trying to condition you guys in court to associate my very presence with calamity. There needs to be police protection. This is something that she's suggesting over and over again. You have to see this. She is trying to condition my child to this. He agreed and said that my son didn't need to be conditioned, which I was very grateful that he, at least took the time to see that point of view. But she still insisted on surveillance, which again was my injection into this, not hers. But just out of spite, she wanted it to be at the East Point police station, which is the closest one to the airport without actually being in the airport. And again, I'm saying that this is unwarranted. You're going to traumatize this child. And at the time, I think they recently went through a renovation, but East Point Police Station years ago was very dreary. It was very ugly. It was very nasty. Barbed wire, wire fence. It was just all around nasty, especially 6, 7 in the morning when we was doing that exchange. It was just gloomy. The whole thing about it was gloomy. I'm like, this is not acceptable. You got to do better than that. And I've gone through Atlanta airport so much. I knew that there's a strong Atlanta Police Department presence there. They even have a station there, a legitimate station out there. And my point was, you can't argue with surveillance. This is the epitome of surveillance. Let's keep it as transparent to our son as possible, not to damage him. He don't need to be exposed to any of that. The way that the APD police station was set up at the time, and probably still to this day, is an opening like you're just going outside. It's transparent to anybody. Nobody would have ever been the wiser that, somebody is insisting on a police presence. And this was to me, I'm saying these things because I don't want my child scarred and affected by this dynamic. She scoffed at that. She didn't want that. She insisted on East Point. After going to East Point and seeing it, I reached back out to her. You can't do this. This is just unacceptable because you're trying to make me look like a heel. And I told this woman that I would pay for her parking if necessary. Again, I'm already giving you over $1,000 a month child support. There is no fee for this person. She's not spending any money. If you've ever visited the Atlanta International Airport, you already understand that parking is free until you spend 30 minutes there anyway. And then it's only $2. You getting over $1,000. I'm traveling $1,400 a month to be in my son's life for 48 hours, and you're gonna cry about $2 that I'm giving you? So I asked her to reconsider. Eventually, she did. We had additional paperwork drawn up as we had in that February, establishing the airport as a new exchange point. And I literally had to beg this woman to be reasonable. I really did. Now later she would say that this was because, or this was so that I wouldn't have to get a rental car. A rental car meant nothing. I was getting a rental car for all those years, month in, month out. Why is a rental car an issue? It never was, but she wanted to seem magnanimous at the time, like she was doing me a favor, doing something. A rental car was nothing. How else was I gonna get around? Genie on the magic carpet? That was crazy. But anything that she said has always been taken as face value. Now, in our documentation, our correspondence going back and forth, I let her know implicitly, I'm just tired of madness. I'm exhausted. All I'm trying to do is see my child, and you making it this, that, and the third when it doesn't have to be. All I want is uninterrupted time with my child. This is 48 hours out of a month. She's with him the rest of the time. My point was what I consider to be common sense. Can I just have a day and a half where you're not imposing on our time? I'm flying into Atlanta. I'm flying back out to go to Maryland simply because I don't want to be around this madness. I'm trying to preserve my sanity at this point and just spend time with my child, because all she's ever brought is negativity. So I'm trying to be away from that. And that didn't stop her and her attorney from going to court saying that I demanded that she not contact our child, which again, it's absolutely ludicrous, not only to say, but it's ridiculous for anybody to even entertain. If this woman refuses to do the most minimal thing that I've asked as a co-parent, the most minuscule thing, how can I then tell her or demand that she do anything? Clearly she's gonna do what she wanna do. But it sounds good, sounds sexy, It's what people want to hear. Oh, the big black man is on the rage. He said don't do this. He's being controlling. All stereotypes that had no basis in what we were saying. And if anybody was objective just a little bit, again, just like me never showing up to her place before that, they would see. This guy's only trying to spend time with his kid. He's going through a lot just to make that happen. What's the big deal? December 23rd, 2012, I had come into town. I was taking my son to my parents, which is about 2.5 hours from Atlanta. And that morning, we were still going through the logistics and whatnot. And under the advice of my counsel, I went to my son's mom's apartment to pick him up. And also, I called law enforcement as I was advised, which I've never ever went to this woman's house and not called law enforcement because I know my reality, and all I want is this peaceful exchange as it was always supposed to be. That morning, it was a Sunday morning, my son and I were going to church immediately once we left Atlanta. My son's mom was going to bring him to 4700 Austell Road. And enough is enough. I'm not doing anything to warrant not being able to pick my child up at his apartment, which is what we agreed to do and as in the documentation. So I went to pick him up. And I was there with 2 deputies from the Sheriff's Department, Cobb County Sheriff's Department. And as we were talking, my son comes out with his mom. And my son's happy to see me, of course. He's smiling. Immediately, his mom takes the situation left. And this woman lets out some kind of bellow or scream. And she raises her arms and puts her arms down. She does a 360-degree move like David Ruffin, a la Temptations. She tells these officers, I'm not supposed to be there. Whatever. I had already told the officers what was going on, and I asked them to help me, finesse the situation with my son. And to their credit, they did. I told them, as I told my son, I had the greatest little boy in the world. I met these police officers. I was telling them how great you are, and they just wanted to meet you. That's how I got rid of the police presence, to make my son feel calm and everything like that. And because I was thinking about this, I didn't want to scar him or anything like that, but clearly in opposite fashion, his mom was only thinking about herself. She didn't care about acting out in front of this kid, saying these things in front of, the deputies, in front of my child, that I wasn't supposed to be there. It was always my fault. Everything was always my fault. With regard to the December 2012 visit, where law enforcement was present, I could tell by my son's mother's demeanor that things were gonna only escalate to a more negative place. That's just how she copes with things. It's always retaliation. So as soon as I got to my parents' home, I sent her 2 emails. This is not what I want, but you just can't control everything. I'm not doing anything to warrant this, and you gotta see how destructive, your behavior is simply because you're trying to control everything. Me picking my son has nothing to do with you. You don't even have to come outside to be around this kid, So why make it about you? Of course, I got no response from either email. And January 2nd, 2013, I received this statement in the mail about, her and her attorney, don't come this, don't do that, or whatever. All the while, no communication from her. But I remember it was dated December 24th, which would have been that Monday. So this woman was so focused on being angry and hostile and combative that the day before Christmas Eve, She just lashed out, and her answer was to, again, escalate something that didn't even have to be a factor, but that's how she handles things. During that visit, while the officer, the deputy, was talking for some 30 minutes, which was absolutely not required. My son's mom is making these accusations, trying to paint me as a monster and whatnot. And one of the deputies, the lead deputy, his demeanor was so surly and so hostile for no reason. The same one who was giving a lecture. And I never forget. I'm sitting there, talking, standing. And this guy, I'm making my position on. I'm just picking my son up for custody. And this guy with a scowl on his surly face says to me, "You're lucky you even get to see your child." And I didn't react because I felt like he was trying to bait me into having a reason not to allow me to see my son. In other words, I thought he wanted to arrest me simply for being there. There is no justification for this man to use that tone, to even say those words. How dare you tell anybody they're lucky to get to see their child? You've passed judgment on me without knowing anything. You didn't just travel 700 miles to see your child. I did. But the fact that you feel somehow justified in speaking to me so harshly because you're doing your job, it's amazing. You see, we talk a lot and we don't talk a lot in society. Too many officers, and I'm not saying all, because I salute any person who goes out there to protect and serve and holds up the honor of the oath that they've taken. But let's be honest, there are a lot that don't, and quite frankly, they don't want to. So many officers, and too many officers, feel that it is beneath them to treat a black man with dignity and respect. That's just a fact. That's what it is. We can not talk about it or say something else all day, but that's what it is. There's no reason for law enforcement to be so aggressive and heavy-handed when it's not even called for. If you're dealing with a person with a criminal background, they could be plaid. Okay, that's different. But if you're dealing with a situation that you can communicate without escalating aggression, then why not do so? The fact that you aggressively choose otherwise says a whole lot. It really does. And out of all the interactions that I've had with law enforcement, this is the one situation that I honestly feel was racist. I absolutely feel it was racist. He had no basis to look so surly and to make those comments. You haven't even done the things that I'm done to be in my child's life, so who are you to judge me? But he felt compelled and he felt entitled to say these things. And I'll say again, I absolutely believe it was racist. But here's the thing, this guy was not white. He wasn't white. So there's a lot of factors that go into these things. Again, my son's mother played on these things because it was advantageous to her. Okay, I get that. But again, she's on audio, video multiple times committing these felonies, and they are felonies. So, you tell me who's the aggressor. Now, whether she's prosecuted or not, doesn't even matter. They don't have to. They've shown no eagerness to rein her in thus far. They probably won't. Simply out of spite, they probably won't. But they won't in front of 7 billion people. That's fine. There have been multiple occasions where this woman has kidnapped my child, refused custody, and that is kidnapping, because the child is a minor. And she has made numerous false statements to the police. On one of the occasions where she withheld my visitation, the day before, on that Friday, she had said that she was contacted by the school. My child was sick. Well, it was my visitation, and if he was sick, she was supposed to contact me as stated in the custody agreement. When it's non-emergency medical situations, I am supposed to have say so in that. She knows that, because what she did was she carved out 6 aspects of my son's life: religion, school, medical, non-emergency, so forth, extracurricular, different things like that. She had all 6 of them. I said to her, well, if we're co-parenting, you get 3 and I get 3, that's co-parenting. It only makes sense. So reluctantly, she did it. I ended up with non-emergency medical. So she was supposed to contact me. She was supposed to have them contact me. She didn't, because she had things that she wanted to do with him that weekend. And this is in text information also, so it will be provided. That was Friday. So that Saturday, I go to Cobb County Court and I see the deputies and so forth, the sheriff's deputies. And I'm just trying to get some clearance as to what I need to do so this woman can stop violating our custody agreement. I end up going there on 2 different occasions on that day. Spent a lot of time there. When I called and spoke to my son, he informed me that his mother said that I wouldn't be seeing him this weekend. So I spoke to him, and then I asked him to put his mom on the phone. 1, that's not your call to make. 2, you're not supposed to be sending messages to this child, which is all stated in the court documentation. Immediately, she says to me, have you been drinking? She screams that. Of course I hadn't. I'm in court all day trying to get my son. But what she was doing, knowing that that wasn't the case, she was saying this in front of my child as to provide a reason as for her actions, that I wasn't going to see my kid. And cowardly, she would blame me and put it in my child's head that your dad did something wrong, that's why you can't see him. Things like that is what I have an issue with. When I relocated to Atlanta, the whole premise of the 30-day notification, she and her attorney, a practicing attorney with a justice degree, a law degree, they took the stance that because I didn't provide 30 days notice, that I couldn't see my child until 30 days. Does that sound like somebody who is trying to co-parent you? Obviously not. And again, this is a practicing attorney who knows better. That's an impossibility. You cannot withhold child custody. You cannot. Any first-year law student knows that, but this man would sit here and play ignorant because he knows he can get away with that, and he has gotten away with it. Everything that this practicing attorney has played ignorant to, the court has never, not one time, not once, held him accountable for pleading ignorance to basic fundamentals of law. Not once. This is how we got to this point of things being beyond the point of repair. Because these people have gone out of their way to exploit apathy within family court. That's why we're here. One of the things that they did, my attorney and myself, we had to get the government light involved. Like, look, you can't do that. So there's no reason visitation starts 30 days from, my arrival. And I think that was a clear indication as to the motivation of both of these people, she and her attorney, who has been complicit throughout. So when you want to ask, how did things get to be this toxic? Because the people who were supposed to be impartial didn't care enough to ask basic questions. That's how. They'll say no, and they'll say something differently, but what they won't say is that what I'm saying is incorrect. That's what they're not going to say, because they know it's the truth. Now, regarding my son's mother's actions, This is something that she did for a very long time. Even when it came to work, if I had to work on certain days, and I would ask, well, let me pick him up once I get off work. It has nothing to do with you. I can pick him up. You know, I'm not asking to come inside your home, anything like that. She refused. And I would have to wait until she felt ready to produce my child. All the while, minutes is ticking off, days is ticking off, but nobody cared enough to ask basic questions. This woman has fought me being in my child's life at every step of the way. Why are you enabling her to control my time? Clearly, this is not something that she's assisting in or something that she wants or values. So why are you letting her dictate when I can see my child and how I can see my child? It doesn't make any sense, other than the fact that you already surmise that I am the problem. Regardless of what this woman does, I am the problem. That's what was decided the moment this woman used the word altercation. That's been the case. That's why I'm producing this documentary. Hopefully, guardian ad litem's, judges would take different positions, prosecutors would take different positions, because this is supposed to be about a child, not gender. And as we all know, it is about gender. That in and of itself is a problem. And when you have mothers that weaponize this practice, and they do so without retaliation or without having any recourse to be held accountable, this is what you get, this dynamic. So, you know, this went on and on and on, her doing these things at will, multiple police reports. And the crazy thing about it is, for the reports that I have, there are probably a dozen reports that I was refused. Atlanta PD refused to give me an incident report behind the times that she didn't show up to the court-ordered location at Atlanta Police Department. Now, I heard all kind of things. You know, let's use common sense. It's a civil matter, not a criminal matter. Well, any fifth grader knows the difference. You know, the two of us having a conversation, I know one of us has a bachelor's degree and is a deanless student. So I clearly comprehend civil and criminal activities. But it was more important for these individuals to condescend to my intellect than to do their job in providing an incident report. See, a lot of times we don't understand a police report, there has to be definitive action. Granted, an incident report is not the same as a police report. An incident report would reflect the fact that this woman withheld visitation and refused to show up to a court-appointed location. So the incident report was warranted. But because I'm supposed to be too primitive, too black to understand these things, I never received one. Unfortunately, a lot of times when you're black, people just want to tell you anything because they don't feel like you have the intellect or the wherewithal to know better. So they can just dismiss you. Okay, that's cool. You know, you've been doing that, keep doing that. But that was that occasion. Another location, not Atlanta PD, it was Smyrna. I know it was at least 3 times I ran into the same police officer. Same thing, he refused to provide an incident report when my visitation was held. And I know I saw him 3 times. And so I can only guesstimate how many times she actually did this, because it was a lot. All these times I missed out on my visitation, and she's adding fuel to the fire. How do you expect me to feel this woman is just doing this because she can and she can get away with it? Because she's being allowed to. She knows what she's doing. You know, eventually I was able to interact with some pretty good officers, and they did, you know, provide me with incident reports and so forth. And I believe both of these was in 2016. That was right before we went to court about her withholding custody. This was actually a criminal case. And when I filled out the report, or when I gave the officer the information, I was so happy that I would finally get somebody who was just taking it seriously and going to provide me with a report. I didn't want anything to go wrong. So when he asked me about her address, I knew the address, but I wasn't sure about the actual apartment number. So I was like, I can get back to you with the apartment number. He was, don't worry about it, I'll get it. Okay, that's the police. They can get the number if they want the number. They can find it, whatever. So, about a week goes by. I pick up the report, and the address is wrong. The address is our old address from when we initially moved. And this is something that I had always suspected. One, her partner is extremely controlling and manipulative. I've always known that. So it didn't make sense that she's doing all this for her partner and she's controlling the shots. If you're controlling, you control in every aspect. Now, when I did a search, because I'm assuming he Googled, Yahoo, or whatever. When I did a search on my son's mom's name, town, and the development that she lived in, apartment development, nothing came back, not one thing. Our old address came back because it was the same town. But when I put her partner's information, or her partner's name instead of hers, it came right up with the apartment. So again, she'll tell anybody who will listen she was doing a friend a favor. Oh, for 9 years, man, for 9 whole years. That was her partner's apartment. She is that controlling. This woman, she may have paid the bills, but it wasn't her apartment. This goes into why there was an issue with me being at the apartment simply to pick up my child. This woman, my son's mother, allowed this kind of presence in his life that created such conflict and such tension that, my son actually was crying about it. And this woman who was supposed to put his needs above all else, put her partner's needs above everything. This wasn't even her apartment. This was her partner's apartment, which I had suspected all along. Long story short, we kept going back and forth with different police reports. And I think that October 31st, following those two incidents, we went to court, and I did not have an attorney for this because it was open and shut to me. This is what this woman did. It's here, it's documented. Why am I paying for an attorney? And I can't afford to keep going back to court, paying these fees. You guys aren't doing anything anyway. So I go to court, and the first thing, the case before mine was a female, and she was trying to have her ex-husband served with child support. They had only been married 18 months. In the state of Georgia, you have to be separated at least a year before you're divorced. So maybe they were married for 6 months or whatever, and I don't know. Anyway, the kid wasn't even his. It was her kid, his stepkid. And this woman was trying to have him placed on child support for a child that wasn't his. And they had only been married for probably 6 months before the separation. I sat there and I listened to the judge. Not one time did he ask why she wasn't having the paternal father served. Well, you already know why. More than likely, he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't going to do anything. Now here it is. This guy thinks enough of you to wife you, take care of your kid for however long he's there. And because you chose to have a kid with a deadbeat, now you want to come drag this guy through the mud and have him paying for a kid that isn't even his. And what really caught my attention was the judge never even asked her about the father, the biological father. His only question to her was how long had they been married. That's not this man's kid. But this is another example of how some women weaponize the courts. Because this man didn't care enough to even ask that basic question. He really didn't. Now, let me digress back to my situation. Again, throughout, the presiding judge in this case, he never once asked for the justification of withholding my child all weekend or at all. Towards the end, her same attorney that I had seen many times in family court says to the judge that it was the weekend prior to school. Makes no difference, has nothing to do with anything. That's not me being blasé, that's a fact of the matter. It has nothing to do with anything. For you to sit here and try to say that that interferes with my time, or that somehow the two of us are too primitive to have a simple discussion about that, I think that's racist. And the fact of the matter is, my son's mom, she's supposedly Pan-African. Her attorney is supposedly Pan-African, of African descent. But it never stopped either one of them from race baiting throughout. They would both constantly use stereotypes, constantly use buzzwords like volatile, aggressive, angry to elicit emotion from the courtroom. Now, with regard to the summer of 2016, again, everything was catered to whatever this woman said, which is fine. I mean, that's pretty much par for the course. However, we had outlined how we would interact at the beginning of the school year. That's documented, and you'll see that here in this project. Now, when I informed her and I gave her that opportunity, just show me some kind of decency, that you just not just gonna keep lying just for sake of lying. And she did anyway. You know what? This is who you choose to be, and I choose to disengage at this point. It wasn't out of malice, it wasn't out of hostility. It's just, this is who you choose to be. I can't have a conversation with anybody who lies to me and about me on a regular basis. You wouldn't do it, so don't ask me to do it. It's just that simple. Now, that was, again, all she had to say to get away with withholding my child. That was the third judge. The second judge was who I actually saw when I filed the criminal paperwork. And, again, same old, same old. The guy asked me, why did it take you so long to come here? Well, it didn't take long. I see my son every other week, the 1st, 3rd, and the 5th. If she misses, or I miss a visitation, that's in essence a month. You guys haven't done anything, so if I missed a month, or I missed that weekend, it's gonna be a month anyway. You haven't done anything. You aren't doing anything. Why am I gonna stop what I'm doing to come here and have the same scenario play out, which you do nothing? I didn't say that, of course, but that was what it was. But anyway, in my mind, it didn't matter. She's done this as a pattern. She's done this for years, which is what I keep telling you guys, and you're doing nothing. So am I supposed to stop what I'm doing for you to do nothing again? I'm really not apt to do that. And he asked me about the circumstances in the household. Was it abusive? I told him that I felt that it was emotionally abusive. I didn't know if it was physically abusive. I didn't think so, but it was definitely emotionally abusive. Again, my son has cried about being in that environment. And I went over that just the other day via text, so I know it's going to be provided. And I remember him saying to me that if it's emotional abuse, if that counts also, and we can have child, protective services or whatever go in. I'm like, I think that's warranted because I know the situation. He said that, well, your child won't be with you during this time. He'll be with, foster care child services. Again, I have joint custody. So if there's an issue with his mom, I have joint custody. He's with me half of the month anyway, he would go to a foster family, then to come with his dad while this is being evaluated. That's crazy. That makes absolutely no sense. So you're gonna traumatize my child by taking him out of his mom's house, him not knowing anything, and then he can't come with me, at least until you investigate this. That makes no sense. Again, people say a lot of things, but there is zero respect or acknowledgement to the father in these circumstances. It's just a default to gender. How are you gonna do this to my child? You gonna traumatize my child? Just because. That's unacceptable. And that's why I didn't follow up with the emotional abuse aspect, because I thought it was just as much emotionally abusive to do that to a child. So I left that part alone. Now, what was funny is the fact that every time this woman would do these things, and I've of course gone like dozens of times, it's always give us 3 to 5 days and when you come back get a report. Now, this woman alleges an incident that is completely made up, ridiculous. Clearly there was no investigation, because when you see it in writing, it's absolutely preposterous. It's physically impossible to happen. Now, this happened on a Sunday that she's alleging. On Tuesday, I had officers here trying to arrest me. I asked, what are you doing here? Just as I'm speaking, now that you can hear me. They never gave me an answer. They didn't feel that warranted, even though it's the law. I'm gonna take y'all through the day that I was arrested for the first time in my life. And initially, I saw one of the sheriff's deputies here, and I asked them what were they doing here. Knowing the situation, I made it clear to them that I don't have a weapon, spun around. I don't have a weapon on me. I don't even have one in my building here. Later, different officers showed up. The 2 highest ranking being African American. One of the officers, there was about 6 or 7 officers. One of the officers, real Bonnie Rubble type, he was clawing at my door, trying to open my door. The whole time I'm asking him, sir, what are you doing here? Everything was sir, start ending with a sir. And he completely ignored me. I don't even think he made eye contact. And one thing that I do remember, the last thing I remember, he said, you can serve me to death, and something after that. But it was very dismissive. When he said that, okay, he's one of them. He just wants confrontation. He wants to be aggressive for no reason. If you tell me that you have a warrant or you're here for whatever reason, then of course I've already let you know I don't have a weapon. I'm willing to comply. But you're not going to treat me like I don't know that you're supposed to tell me what you're doing here. That's the law. But rather than to do that, he would rather have all this confrontation. Okay. Long story short, he goes to his car, wherever to get right. He comes back in a helmet, shield, got his billy club out. All of this is glass. Over there is glass. Of course, they're not going to pay for this being repaired. I am. At that point, I see, he's made up his mind to be confrontational and aggressive for no reason. So I open the door. The whole time we're talking, just like I'm talking now. I open the door, and immediately this man grabs my arm and drags me down to the dirt. He then, as I'm on the ground, it's of course some 6 or more officers here. I'm clearly not resisting, nor would I resist. That's crazy. But because of the charge of domestic violence, maybe he just did it anyway. But he has my arm wrenched in such a way that he's trying to tear my arm up. And as a matter of fact, it took 6 months, a solid 6 months for my shoulder to heal, because of the way he was trying to let me know who's in charge. The whole time, you got a black major, you got a black sergeant sitting here. Okay, kudos for you guys. Great. Not one time did anybody You don't have to do all of that. Matter of fact, all they had to do was ask me, put my hands up, step back, boom. None of that had to even transpire. But this is just what this man wanted to do. That's it. Now, it must have been some 11, 12 hours later that I was even told what they had been doing here. That's when I was processed. And of course, it was a fictitious story that my son's mom had told, which I have a copy of that. Long story short, this woman said that she was fearful that I was going to, well, she said that I had hit the back of her windshield on the passenger side. And she was fearful that I would run around to the other side to bust out the driver's side window and hit her in the face. Now, this is all very detailed, right? Nothing like that has ever happened before, nor would it happen. Again, my son is present, even my son wasn't present. I've taken a great deal of abuse from these people. Never resorted to violence, nor would I. That's dumb. I knew the night of my son's birthday party in 2012 that it would be everything that these people wanted for me to be out of the way. That was the end goal all the time. Why would I give in to what they wanted and do anything to have myself prosecuted out of the way? Now I'm in jail. I can't even see my son. That makes no sense. But when you already believe that a black man is not going to reason these things out, because he's too animalistic to reason, you don't even stop to think about these things. The point was to rob me of my time, and that's exactly what he did. While I'm at the airport, she's at the fire station talking about that's the place. You know that's not the place. But what she would do, she would take my son there. My son's anxious to see me as I'm anxious to see him. But she would drive off, knowing I'm on the other side of town. Even when I ask her, I'm at the designated location. I will come there, I'll be there as soon as I can, give me 30 minutes. And this woman refused. Now this is Friday. My visitation goes through Tuesday. I'm texting her, I'm on the phone, can we meet tomorrow? So I see my kid. She ignores everything. That's been her MO for the years. She ignores attempts at communication. And for the record, these things that are beyond basic, I've had to go to court for to fight when it was so simple. And now this woman has the audacity to cry about, well, he won't talk to me, like it's my fault. We had the opportunity to speak as humans and as co-parents. This woman was so foul and so vile that she would want to spend money, be aggressive, lie on me in court to paint me a monster rather than to be decent. When I relocated, trying to minimize things from a common sense standpoint, I don't need to see you. I can pick my son up from school and take him to school on Tuesday. We don't even need to cross paths. This woman told me in an email, I'm not okay with that. What do you mean not okay with that? We had to go back to court for that, just like to pick my son up from school. But she'll tell anybody who will listen that she's always supported that. No, she didn't. That's beyond basic. But I had to go back to court to get that stipulated. And she fought that every step of the way. Also had documentation, her attorney to my attorney. He pretended to have no less than common sense. He was trying to fight that. This is why we keep going back and forth to court, and these people want to rewrite history. That's fine. I don't particularly care, but what I can do is press play and show you who's lying. And again, these are felonies. So however Cobb County District Attorney chooses to handle this situation, handle that. But this is what becomes of when you want these people in your business so badly that you can't even see straight. You would rather doom me than be decent. Okay, these felonies they carry mandatory sentences. I don't know what you expect me to do for it. Now, moving forward as a community, I would truly hope that you see how destructive this behavior is. But this is my reality. This is my kids' reality. And you could see this coming years ago. I begged and pleaded with my son's mom, don't go down this road. I still want to work with you, but I can't trust you. I'm still going to be the father I have been. Nothing could ever change that. Was never going to change that. But I can't help if I'm forced to be in a co-parenting dynamic with somebody who's uncompromising and unreasonable. If they're unreasonable and uncompromising, it's not a whole lot I can do but keep being a great father or be the best father that I can be. And that's all I can do. But don't let my situation be your situation. If you are a mother and you're not crazy about the father of your child, give him an opportunity to do better. If he doesn't, then okay, leave him alone. I get that. But give him the opportunity to do better for your kids' sake, not for your sake, but for your kids' sake. And if he doesn't, fine, you did everything you were supposed to do. And for fathers, look, I don't believe your hell is any more hot than mine. Mine is pretty hot, but I still go through it because I was never gonna let nobody allow me or make me stop being a great dad. You got no reason not to be in your child's life. I don't care how many attorneys they get, how much law enforcement they put on you, the courts, the judges, whatever. That's not a reason for you to stop being a father. I didn't let it stop me, so you got no reason to let it stop you. We can only do what we believe is in the best interest of our children. But let's do that. Not special interests, not special agendas or anything like that. It's about our kids. When you get these people in your business unnecessarily, sometimes you find out the hard way. I love my folks. I just hope we do better as a community and for us raising our kids, not feeding on one another, and not allowing special interests and agendas to corrupt what we are trying to do as far as advancing our communities. Thank you. Love you.